Tonight on NewsCenter. Defense-related measures as Seoul and Washington vow to up the pressure on Pyongyang. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State says a fifth nuclear test by the North could trigger fresh sanctions, including adjusting defense capabilities by Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Korea's finance minister unveils the nation's plans to boost support for new growth engines, quite possibly in areas of the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. And huge wins for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in New York. Their decisive wins usher in a new phase in the 2016 race for the White House. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 9 a.m. in Washington, 2 p.m. in London, and 10 on a Wednesday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Stronger collaboration to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions. A flurry of diplomacy on various levels took place in Seoul today to do just that. Our Kwon So-ah starts us off with the Seoul-Washington strategic talks, a three-way meeting between South Korea, U.S., and Japan, as well as a speech by Seoul's Foreign Affairs Minister.
On their second round of strategic talks in Seoul Wednesday, South Korea's Deputy Chief of the Presidential Office of Cheongwade, Jo Tae-yong, and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken saw eye-to-eye that pressure on North Korea should be kept or strengthened. The two agreed to enforce efforts in the implementation of UN Security Council sanctions, as well as independent measures to support those by South Korea, the US, Japan, and the EU. On the same day, South Korea's top nuclear envoy Kim Hong-kyun and his US and Japanese counterparts Sung Kim and Kimihiro Ishikane put their heads together for response measures against North Korea's failed ballistic missile launch last week, as well as further provocations from the regime, including a possible fifth nuclear test. Seoul and Washington's representatives followed the three-way discussion with one-on-one talks on the same matter later in the day, said to have touched upon ways to increase cooperation from China in curbing North Korea's missile and nuclear weapons program. Evident in these strings of bilateral and multilateral discussions, Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se stressed during a lecture Wednesday that South Korea's diplomatic environment has changed over the years, calling for more omnidirectional cooperation in changing North Korea.
We haven't closed the doors to dialogue with North Korea, but as we can see through the UN Security Council's resolution, there is a clear global consensus that the vicious cycle we've seen in the past, meaning North Korea's violations followed by negotiations and again violations, must stop.
Minister Yoon says there are already signs that show North Korea is feeling the pain of the measures imposed on the regime's latest provocations, saying that the international community has never been more united in its desire to resolve the North Korea issue. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
If North Korea forges ahead with another nuclear provocation, it could face a fresh set of sanctions. Not only that, defense-related measures as well. With the prospect of another nuclear test, there's also growing speculation about the regime's timing and its intentions. Connie Kim has more on the rest of the world's yet another warning against Pyongyang. Stay away from launching any more provocations.
The United States has warned North Korea that it could be forced to respond with defense-related measures with South Korea and Japan if Pyongyang makes good on its threat to conduct a fifth nuclear test. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Pacific Affairs Daniel Russel said Tuesday Washington could also impose new sanctions banning North Korean workers overseas from sending money home. He said the new sanctions could either be unilateral or multilateral, involving Europe or Southeast Asian nations. Pyongyang conducted its fourth nuclear test in January and has been slapped with layers of unilateral and multilateral sanctions as punishment. Seoul's Unification Ministry said the North will face strong additional measures if it goes ahead with a fifth test, but did not elaborate. While South Korea says a fifth nuclear test appears imminent, a new report suggests Pyongyang had been planning for a consecutive fourth and fifth nuclear tests. Citing a report from a Swedish research institute, Washington-based Radio Free Asia also speculated on the North's motivations, saying Pyongyang wants to be acknowledged as a nuclear state, to suspend the annual Seoul-Washington military drills, and to replace the armistice agreement to a peace treaty, officially ending the Korean War. North Korea's past 4 nuclear tests have been conducted within a span of 3 to 4 years, and another nuclear test this year would be unprecedented. Some North Korea experts say Pyongyang could use its 5th nuclear test as a bargaining chip for seeking dialogue with the U.S. when North Korean Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong arrives in New York for the signing of the Paris Accord at the UN headquarters. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The man next in line to lead American troops stationed in Korea says the U.S. needs to continue providing a nuclear umbrella to South Korea. He also rejected claims made by the Republican frontrunner in the race for the White House, saying Donald Trump has got his math wrong on a very important issue. Our Kim Hyun-bin has more on remarks made by General Vincent Brooks.
The incoming commander of U.S. Forces Korea has stressed the importance of South Korea being covered by the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Speaking at his Senate confirmation hearing in Washington on Tuesday, General Vincent Brooks said his removal could make Seoul contemplate its own nuclear armament in the face of threats posed by North Korea. He added that he could not see a time in the foreseeable future when the U.S. could or would remove it. The general also stressed that South Korea is shouldering a significant load of the cost for keeping the roughly 29,000 U.S. troops stationed in the country. He rejected Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump's claims that Seoul contributes next to nothing compared to what it gets in return. Brooks noted that South Korea paid some $880 million last year, and the share goes up according to inflation every year. As well as paying around half of the total cost of stationing troops, the general says South Korea is paying more than 90% of the $10.8 billion to relocate U.S. troops to a massive new base in Pyeongtaek, south of Seoul. In a written testimony, Brooks said that the North's leader, Kim Jong-un, is more risk-tolerant, arrogant, and impulsive than his father, Kim Jong-il, raising the prospect of miscalculation. Brooks said the young leader is more aggressive with advancing the regime's nuclear program and ignoring international concerns, and added that his father was more willing to offer negotiations. Brooks also emphasized the need for a U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD to be deployed to the Korean peninsula to protect the South from North Korea's growing ballistic missile threats. If confirmed, Brooks will replace General Curtis Scaparrotti as U.S. Forces Korea commander. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now shifting our focus, Friday marks the 46th anniversary of Korea's Saemaul Undong movement. It's a unique community movement that helped lay the economic foundation for modern-day Korea. President Park Geunhye met with hundreds of Saemaul Undong leaders today, where she called for an upgrade of the movement's role, both on the domestic front as well as the global front. Our Song Ji-sun takes a look back at the movement that helped Korea emerge as one of the biggest economies, as well as the future role of Saemaul Undong.
한국의 성공적인 농촌 개발 전략인 새마을 운동을 농촌 개발 패러다임으로 발전시켜서 개도국의 농촌 개발을 적극 지원할 계획입니다.
That was President Park Geunhye's pledge at last year's UN Sustainable Development Summit to help developing countries through Korea's Saemaul Undong initiative, which was first implemented in the country in the 1970s. For a more effective implementation of the movement that helped and encouraged rural residents become more self-reliant, the UNDP and the OECD also carried out joint studies to cater the initiative to developing countries with customized programs. More than 70 countries have adopted the Saemaul Undong movement, which helped Korea become the world's 13th largest economy. And to celebrate nearly 5 decades of can-do spirit that helped Korea and dozens of developing countries take growth leaps, President Park Geunhye sat down with hundreds of local Saemaul leaders, stressing their role in uniting the nation and to help root out poverty still existing across the globe. She stressed the old model must be revived in a new manner to help the country overcome current challenges and to further expand the movement overseas. President Park also called on regional leaders to help lead their innovation drives, as their initiatives on the creative economy, economic innovation, and structural reforms can only be realized with the nation's support.
송지선, Arirang News.
Korea's Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho is amping up the nation's reform efforts to raise the country's growth potential. Now this as concerns rise over low growth becoming a trend in Korea, which still has a long way ahead to catch up with other advanced economies. Now for more on the government's policies for economic reforms, we have our Hwang Ji-hye joining me live in the studio. Now, as Ji-hye, earlier today, Seoul's finance minister unveiled plans to overhaul the country's industrial makeup. Exactly what does it mean by that?
Meeting reporters on Tuesday, you said the government will push ahead with structural reforms in the industrial sector. So while the government pushes ahead in reforming the labor, finance, public, and education sectors, the government is trying to foster new growth engines that can raise the competitiveness of the overall economy. Possible candidates for this would be those related to the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. The push for reform in a new sector comes, as experts say, the initial drive to transform four key sectors that I've just mentioned will not be an easy task under the new political landscape after last week's general election.
And structural reform has been always on the administration's plan. However, with the opposition parties in power now, the labor market reform will be more difficult to deliver.
So, Ji-hye, the latest announcement points to the government focusing more on or investing more on the longer-term measures or issues and short-term issues to boost the economy. I suppose this is a positive move because Korea's traditional growth engines have been losing steam recently.
Definitely. The move to prop up budding industries is in line with Yu's earlier comments, vowing to personally oversee corporate restructuring that is ailing conventional industries that once led growth in the country. Korea's exports have been losing steam, falling for the 15th straight month in March. The shipbuilding and shipping industries in particular have been facing ballooning losses on the back of plunging oil prices and a global economic downturn. On Tuesday, he emphasized once again that the restructuring process will speed up in the first half of this year, but with major financial institutions, including the BOK, downgrading the country's growth outlook to the 2% range, it looks difficult for both the government and the central bank to escape pressure for more stimulus.
What is more urgent now is short-term stimulus measures. Both the BOK and the Finance Ministry seem reluctant about it, but they really need to give it more consideration. Raising the growth potential is an issue of the future, but we won't be able to realize it if we don't survive now.
The Bank of Korea expects the economy to expand 2.8% this year. This makes it look almost certain that Korea is falling into a low-growth trap. The country's GDP growth stood at 3.7% in 2011, but plunged to 2.3% in the next year. Ever since then, the growth rate has remained in the 2% range, except for in 2014.
Ji-hye, so the market seems to want more easing, analysts too. So why are the government and the central bank so reluctant to make that move?
If the government injects more money into the economy through a supplementary budget, it will burden the country's fiscal soundness. And of course, it goes same with the rate cuts. It can cause foreign investors to pull out of Korea and further push up household debt levels that already stands at around $1 trillion. The top central banker has also been raising skepticism about the effectiveness of a rate trim, adding that a cut alone cannot be effective in boosting growth and that monetary policies need to go in hand with fiscal policies and structural reforms.
Right, which makes next month interest decision all the more interesting for us to watch.
Of course.
All right, Ji-hye, thank you so much for that report.
You're welcome.
Now, the final session of the outgoing 19th National Assembly starts tomorrow, and lawmakers will convene for the first time since last week's general election. But as the election results flipped Korea's political landscape on its head, There are growing concerns the new dynamic will only exacerbate the party's inability to thrash out their differences and get some key bills passed. Our Kim Young-gil has the latest from the nation's political realm.
The ruling Saenuri Party hopes to make the best out of the 19th National Assembly's final session.
We will do our best to pass economic revitalization bills and other livelihood bills that we failed to pass before the general election.
The bills the party sees as key are related to labor reform, promoting the service sector, and preventing cyber terrorism. But the main opposition Minju Party of Korea is refusing to endorse any of them and will instead focus on getting its own set of economic bills passed. The party says one of the 4 labor reform bills will make it easier for companies to fire workers, while the service industry promotion bill will pave the way for privatization of all medical services, triggering a dramatic increase in medical costs. Concerning the anti-cyber terrorism bill, the Minju Party is against setting up a cybersecurity center under the authority of the National Intelligence Service.
We will focus on legislating the economic bills endorsed by our party, including ones to protect small and medium-sized businesses.
The minor opposition People's Party also vowed to offer solutions for a major economic issue vexing the nation.
Our party will strive to legislate bills to help solve the high youth unemployment rate. We ask for the cooperation of both the Park administration and the ruling party.
Co-leader Chun Jung-bae also emphasized livelihood issues, such as increasing pension payouts and raising the minimum wage, which he stressed is well below that of other OECD nations. All 3 parties seem optimistic about the month ahead as they prepare for the 20th National Assembly that kicks off on May 30th, and they're likely hoping the mood will help ease them through a series of internal leadership struggles that are just beginning to unfold within each party. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, today is Korea's Day of Persons with Disabilities. It's a day designated to increase public awareness, understanding, and acceptance of people with disability and celebrate their achievements and contributions. Now, a number of events took place across the country to do just that. Our Shin Se-min has a wrap-up.
Marking the 36th Day of Persons with Disability on Wednesday, President Park Geunhye said the government will boost the country's infrastructure to help improve the lives of people with disabilities. The president also said the government would do its best to help cultivate an environment that can better suit both the disabled and the general public.
이처럼 꿈을 향해 나아가는데 장애가 걸림돌이 되지 않고 열정을 가진 장애인들에게 보다 나은 기회를 줄 수 있는 사회를 만드는데 우리 모두가 힘을 모아야 합니다.
The message also resonated with the country's prime minister as he promised to set up 17 support centers across the country.
The government will work to expand customized support services for individuals with different disabilities.
Adding that the government is closely listening to those with disabilities, Prime Minister Hwang said it's a mission for our entire community to establish a society that poses no discrimination against one's abilities. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Over in the United States, New York voters gave big wins to frontrunners Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in their bids for their party's presidential nomination. The state was always going to be friendly for them, but the scale of their victories reflects more than a home field advantage, and it exposes some important limitations in their opponents' campaigns. Our Hwang Ho-jun brings us up to speed on the race for the White House.
Although there weren't any major upsets today, winning the Empire State was more than significant for both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, because it moves them both that much closer to sewing up the nomination. With 98% of the votes counted, Trump, the real estate mogul and Queens native, claimed victory with over 60% of the vote. Ohio Governor John Kasich was second with just over 25%, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz got less than 15%. Of the 95 delegates up for grabs, Trump won 89, Kasich got 3, and Cruz 0. To win the nomination at the party convention in the summer, a total of 1,230 delegates are needed on the Republican side. In his victory speech, Trump was not afraid to express his confidence about his prospects in the rest of the nominating contest.
We don't have much of a race anymore. Based on what I'm seeing on television, Senator Cruz is just about mathematically eliminated.
On the Democratic side, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton clinched a crucial win against her rival, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, with about 58% of the vote to his 42%. Of the 247 delegates up for grabs for the Democrats, Clinton goes home with 135 and Sanders with 104. Democratic candidates need 2,383 delegates to win the nomination. Clinton, who was elected the first female senator of New York in 2000, said in her victory speech that the win in her adopted home state is personal for her.
Today, you proved once again there's no place like home.
Even though Senator Sanders fared better than his Republican counterparts, the loss in New York has dampened his momentum after a string of victories. The next big date to look out for? The 26th of this month, as voters across 5 states will head to the polls. Hwang Woo-jun, Arirang News.
A magnitude 6.2 earthquake shook the coast of Ecuador earlier this Wednesday, just days after a bigger quake battered the area and killed nearly 500 people. And this just coming in, another powerful tremor with a magnitude of about 5.6 has just hit us off northeastern Japan. This is around 96 kilometers southeast of Sendai, Honshu, which a devastating quake and tsunami struck in March 2011. Now, this as that country still reels from twin earthquakes that hit that nation last week. Our Lee Yun-shin has the details.
Local officials have yet to report any signs of damage or deaths from the second strike on Wednesday. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says the 6.2 magnitude quake struck in the ocean 70 kilometers from the town of Esmeraldas. There have been no official tsunami warnings yet. Just 3 days ago, a powerful earthquake struck Ecuador, killing at least 525 people, injuring thousands, and leaving even more without homes.
All of our houses are on the ground. Everything is lost. Everything is lost. There is nothing we can do with what was God's desire. There is nothing we can do.
Global organizations are rushing to send support amid warnings of aftershocks and additional quakes. The United Nations World Food Program is sending 15 days' worth of food for 8,000 people and bottled water to the worst-hit areas. The UN agency will also send temporary shelters and mosquito nets as a precaution against the Zika virus. Geologists fear aftershocks, and some project the consecutive quakes may be a precursor to a hypothetical earthquake of magnitude 8 or greater, known as the Big One. Lee Yun-shin, Arirang News.
Another earthquake rattled the infamous Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean, this time in the Philippines. The latest tremor is stoking great concern regarding the possibilities of more quakes ahead, especially when Japan and Ecuador, located on opposite sides of that ring, are still coping with hundreds of aftershocks from mega earthquakes that occurred just days apart. Now, how concerned should we be about that possibility, and what about the Korean Peninsula? Our Lee Min-young has this report.
Another seismic activity was detected along the so-called Ring of Fire. According to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, a magnitude 5 earthquake hit Davao Oriental, located in the southern area of the Philippines, early morning on Wednesday local time. The agency noted that there were no casualties nor damage reported from the quake. Following the deadly earthquakes that hit Japan and Ecuador last week, Wednesday's seismic activity in the Southeast Asian country has sparked widespread concerns that the recent series of earthquakes might be correlated as they continue to be detected in countries situated along the Pacific Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire refers to a long chain of active volcanoes and earthquake-prone sites that run around the Pacific Rim, and it is believed that about 90% of all seismic activities in the world occur around this area. As the Korean peninsula is located on the same tectonic plate as Japan, there are growing concerns that Korea may also be vulnerable to powerful earthquakes. Experts, however, say it's a highly unlikely scenario.
A large-scale earthquake only occurs on long monolayers beneath the ground and when pressure accumulates on them. But Korea falls under neither of those circumstances. Of course, we should be prepared for mild earthquakes, but there is almost no possibility that we could experience one like the ones that hit Japan.
The expert also pointed out that there is no causal link between the recent series of earthquakes, and rather the Ring of Fire could be going through a period of activity for the time being. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Now shifting our focus again, Korean startups are starting to look abroad for opportunities. One ambitious group of entrepreneurs recently had the chance to rub shoulders with investors and suss out their business prospects. Our Kim Jung-soo takes us to the Korea-UK Startup Forum.
Nearly 24 Korean startups specializing in everything from the Internet of Things to biohealth and e-commerce were in the UK recently, hoping for a shot at taking their venture overseas. They were invited to the heart of the world's third largest tech cluster for the day-long Korea-UK Startup Forum on Tuesday at East London Tech City. The tech hub currently hosts over 1,000 startups and attracted over $2 billion in investments last year. The Korean startups seemed confident the event would give them a boost.
I'm sure we can make the best of our opportunity in London.
The more than 100 investors and government officials present also expressed interest in the Korean tech industry.
If we can actually find good products and technologies that can be made better out of Korea and more innovative, we should be investing in them.
The Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, which co-hosted the event with the UK Embassy, says it will organize more events like this to encourage productive conversations between startups and international investors. Kim Jung-soo, Arirang News.
Well, Korea was long known as a country where starting early and finishing late meant progress, and the country developed rapidly. Well, the nation is now among the top 12 biggest economies in the world, and greater focus is being placed on the quality of life, which of course translates to fewer hours on the job. But is that the case on the ground for the average Koreans? How many hours a week do you spend enjoying leisure activities? Well, stats are out, and our Kim Hye-sung helps us read between the lines.
For many Koreans, an 8-hour workday is now the norm. Government-run Statistics Korea says from 1999 to 2014, the amount of time Koreans spent on average doing office and housework fell to just below 8 hours. The figure stood at nearly 9 hours in 1999. Meanwhile, the time people need to sleep, eat, and do other personal maintenance increased by an hour from 10 hours and 18 minutes to 11 hours and 14 minutes. Statistics Korea says leisure time changed little during the same period. Changes in government policies appear to have contributed to the work-life shift.
Korea's Labour Standards Act cut mandatory working hours from 44 to 40, and the Korean government has been implementing various policies to cut working hours to help improve people's quality of life and health.
According to Statistics Korea, adult women do 3 hours more of housework a day than men, but men are helping out a bit more than the past. In 2014, men spent 14 minutes more helping out around the house than they did in 1999, and women spent 33 fewer minutes on chores at home.
More women are joining the labor force these days, so the traditional perception of gender roles is changing, and more men are helping with housework.
Amid Korea's changing society, the trend of decreasing working hours is expected to continue. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Well, I certainly hope our viewers here in Seoul had an umbrella ready for their evening commute, as it's still raining here in the capital. So let's go and check on the latest weather updates with our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun.
Hello, Ga-ryang. Well, it's not just in Seoul, but heavy rain is in the forecast for the southern coastal regions and Jeju Island until tomorrow afternoon, along with gusty winds, thunder, and lightning.
Well, those are conditions that demand cancellations on any travel plans.
Indeed. Well, the southern provinces shall expect up to 80 millimeters of heavy rainfall along with thunder and lightning, whereas Seoul will see light rain falling by lunch hour tomorrow. And rain will start to let up in the western parts of the country by the afternoon, and temperatures will be similar to today's. So let's take a closer look. Daily low here in Seoul will kick off at 11 degrees Celsius. Busan and Jeju will start out at 14 and 17 degrees Celsius. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will see a high of 18 degrees Celsius, and Daegu and Busan will also top out at 18. Now, after the rain, we'll have pleasant weather conditions in the upcoming weekend under mostly sunny skies with mild temperatures. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that is our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Moon Geunhye. Thank you as always for staying with us, and we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.